On New Year's Eve, I had my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson over to spend the evening together. We were joking and enjoying dinner when my son's phone suddenly rang. He said it was work and headed down to the basement. A moment later, my 9-year-old grandson, Mason, said he needed the bathroom and followed the same direction. When Mason returned, all the color had drained from his face. His hands were shaking as he rushed to me, grabbed my arm, and pulled me away from the table. In a hushed, terrified voice, he whispered, "Grandpa, we have to leave now." I heard Dad talking about you. What he told me next sent a chill straight through my body. By 10:30 that night, I was barricaded inside my bathroom, calling 911, while my own son slammed against the door, trying to force his way in. Can real quick comment below where you're listening from right now. I read every single one. Now here's what happened. I was setting the table when the memory hit me like a winter gust. Eleanor 3 New Year's Eves ago, laughing as smoke billowed from the oven. To Sean? She'd said, wiping flour from her cheek. After 42 years, you'd think I'd mastered dinner rolls. I'd kissed her forehead, told her they were perfect. They weren't. But she was. Tonight the rolls sat on the counter in their plastic grocery store container. No burnt edges, no laughter, no Eleanor. The dining table stretched before me, that solid oak piece her father had built back in '73. I'd set 4 places white plates Eleanor had picked out at some department store sailcloth napkins she'd insisted we only use for holidays. My hands moved through the motions I'd watched her perform 1,000 times. But the house felt wrong, too quiet, too empty. Through the window, snow fell heavy over Maple Ridge Drive. The kind of Syracuse snowfall that made the whole neighborhood look like a Christmas card. Eleanor used to love watching it from this very spot. Her hand warm in mine. That was 3 years ago, before the heart attack took her on a Tuesday morning in March, before I learned what alone really meant. I checked the roast chicken in the oven, golden, perfectly cooked, utterly joyless. The mashed potatoes sat warming on the stove. Eleanor's green bean casserole, the recipe I'd finally memorized after she was gone, waited under foil. 5-0. They'd be here soon. My son Connor was coming with his family. That should have comforted me. Should have filled this house with something other than ghosts and silence. It didn't. The doorbell chimed at 5:15. I opened the door to a blast of cold air and 3 figures dusted with snow. Connor stood there, stamping his feet on the welcome mat, his breath fogging in the porch light. Behind him, Rachel, my daughter-in-law, clutched her coat closed with one hand, and Mason, my 9-year-old grandson, hung back near the railing, backpack slung over his shoulder like he was ready to run. "Dad." Connor pulled me into a brief hug. I caught the scent of expensive cologne, something new, something sharp. When he stepped back, I noticed the watch. Rose gold Rolex. The kind that cost more than I'd made in 6 months of teaching high school English. Come in, I said, ushering them inside. "You'll freeze out there?" Rachel handed me her coat cashmere, I noticed, and set her handbag on the entry table. Prada, the real kind with that little triangle logo. I'd priced one once thinking about Eleanor's birthday. $3,000 minimum. Last month Connor had called me, said money was tight. "Real estate market's brutal right now, Dad." We're barely keeping our heads above water. I'd offered to help. He'd refused. The watch said otherwise. So did the handbag. "Dinner smells amazing." Rachel said, her voice too bright, too cheerful. She had that quality about her, a kind of performative happiness that felt rehearsed. "What are we having? Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Grandma Eleanor's green beans." "Oh." Her smile flickered for just a second. "Lovely." We moved to the dining room. Connor pulled out Rachel's chair with exaggerated care than his own. His eyes were already drifting to his phone, checking it compulsively. Mason slipped into the seat beside me without a word. I ruffled his hair. "How's school, buddy? Fine?" He didn't look up. I'd taught for 38 years. I knew the difference between fine and something's wrong. Mason was a quiet kid by nature, but tonight he had that watchful quality, the way a deer looks before bolting. His eyes kept tracking his father's movements. Connor's phone buzzed once, twice, three times in rapid succession. Each time his jaw tightened, he'd glance at the screen knuckles going white around the fork, then set it face down without responding. "Everything okay at work?" I asked, passing the chicken. "Fine." That word again. Same hollow ring. Rachel filled the silence with chatter sales at Nordstrom Neighbors, renovating Mason's upcoming school play. I nodded at appropriate moments, made the right sounds. But I was watching Connor. My son had always been easy to read. As a boy, he'd worn his emotions openly. Joy, anger, disappointment, all right there on his face. Somewhere between Little League and real estate development, he'd learned to hide them. But a father knows. Tonight I saw fear. The phone buzzed again. Connor's fork clattered against his plate. "Sorry," he muttered. "Work." It's been he didn't finish. The phone was already at his ear, his chair scraping back. "I need to take this." Rachel's smile never wavered. "Of course, honey." Connor glanced at the screen. Something shifted in his expression. Something dark, then looked at me. "Won't be long?" He disappeared toward the basement door. His footsteps echoed down the wooden stairs, growing fainter until there was only the sound of Rachel's voice, too loud, now talking about sales and bargains and things that didn't matter. I wasn't listening. I was watching Mason. He'd set down his fork. His young face had gone, troubled eyes fixed on the empty doorway where his father had vanished. It was the same expression he'd worn 3 years ago at Eleanor's funeral, too young to understand death, but old enough to know something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. Before I could ask if he was all right, Mason pushed back his chair and stood. "I need to use the bathroom," he mumbled, already moving toward the hallway. "Honey, use the one upstairs." Rachel started, but he was gone. I should have been happy to see them. This was what I'd wanted. Family together on a holiday that Eleanor had loved so much. The house filled with voices again. The table full instead of empty. But as I reached for my water glass, my hand was shaking. Connor's hand had trembled too, cutting his steak. I'd seen it, the way the knife slipped, the way he'd gripped it tighter to compensate. And Rachel's smile. It never reached her eyes. Not once. Outside, the snow continued to fall thick and silent, covering everything in white. Inside, something cold settled deep in my chest. An instinct honed over decades of reading troubled students, of knowing when someone was lying, when someone was scared. For the first time in 40 years of raising Connor in this house, of building a life with Eleanor in these rooms, I felt afraid in my own home. Dinner should have been perfect. It wasn't. Connor's phone kept going off, vibrating against the table with insistent little buzzes that made Rachel's chatter sound shrill by comparison. Each time it happened, Connor's face went a shade paler. By the fourth buzz, his skin had taken on a waxy quality, like something you'd see in a funeral home. "Sorry," he muttered again, not looking at anyone. He reached for his wine glass, knocked it with his knuckles. Red wine sloshed but didn't spill. His hands weren't steady. Rachel launched into a story about the Johnsons' kitchen renovation. Her voice climbed higher, faster, filling every silence before it could settle. I recognized the pattern, and I'd seen it in parent-teacher conferences when someone was covering for a failing student. Talk loud enough, long enough, and maybe no one notices what you're hiding. I noticed. So did Mason. My grandson had gone very still, the way small animals do when they sense a predator. The phone buzzed again. This time Connor stood up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood. "I need to handle this work." He was already moving toward the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, before anyone could respond. "Of course, honey," Rachel said to his retreating back then to me with that brilliant smile. "The market's been crazy lately. Poor Connor barely gets a moment's rest." I watched him disappear through the doorway that led to the basement stairs. His footsteps descended quickly, urgently, and then there was nothing but the sound of Rachel talking about granite countertops and subway tile. 2 minutes passed, maybe 3. "I need to use the bathroom," Mason said quietly. Rachel barely paused her monologue. "Upstairs, sweetie." But Mason was already sliding off his chair, already moving toward the hallway, not upstairs. The same direction his father had gone. "Mason?" Rachel called after him, but the boy had vanished. She turned back to me, that smile never faltering. "Kids," she said, as if that explained everything. I picked up my fork, set it down, picked it up again. Something was wrong. The feeling had been there since they'd arrived, but now it pressed against my chest like a hand. In the basement, Mason moved on silent feet. I didn't know this yet, wouldn't know until later, but years of avoiding his parents' arguments had taught him how to be invisible, how to make himself small. The basement stairs creaked under Connor's weight, but Mason was light, careful. He reached the bottom and heard his father's voice, low and urgent, coming from near the electrical panel. Mason ducked behind the old water heater, the one I'd been meaning to replace for 2 years. From there he could see everything. Connor stood at the circuit breaker box, phone in one hand, the other tracing the lines of switches and wires, but he wasn't on a call. He was talking to himself. "She said it worked perfectly last time." Connor muttered, his finger following a particular circuit. "Just do it exactly like she showed you." Mason's breath caught. He pressed himself tighter against the water heater's bulk. "The outlet by the tub." Connor continued moving toward the small bathroom in the corner. "Disconnect the ground wire. Simple, clean." My son's voice had taken on a strange quality, like he was reciting instructions, convincing himself like he'd memorized something he didn't want to remember. 920,000 by Friday. No choice, no other way out. Connor disappeared into the bathroom. Mason heard the sound of a cover plate being removed, the small metallic clicks of screws hitting tile. "She said he won't suffer." Connor's voice drifted out softer now, quick, like going to sleep. Mason's hands had started to shake. He pressed them against the cold, concrete wall, trying to steady himself, trying to understand what he was hearing. His father emerged from the bathroom, checking his phone, checking his watch. "Quick," he repeated, like a prayer, like a curse. Then Connor froze. His head snapped up. "Hello." Mason's elbow had knocked against a paint can. Just a small sound, but in the quiet basement it rang like a bell. "Is someone there?" Mason didn't breathe, didn't move. Through the gap beside the water heater, he watched his father scan the basement, eyes moving across the shadows, the stored boxes, the old furniture covered in sheets. Connor took 3 steps toward the water heater. Mason's heart hammered so hard he thought it might give him away. 2 more steps. Then Connor's phone buzzed. He looked down at it, and whatever he saw there made him turn away. He headed back up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, his footsteps fading into the floor above. Mason waited, counted to 30 in his head the way his teacher had taught him when he got anxious. Then he ran. He burst through the basement door into the hallway, his face drained of color, his breath coming in short gasps. His small hands found my sleeve and gripped tight, pulling me toward the kitchen, away from the dining room, where Rachel's voice still chattered on about nothing and everything. I let him lead me. Let him pull me into the kitchen, where the fluorescent light made his terror look even starker. "Mason, what, Grandpa?" His voice was barely above a whisper. His eyes, those eyes that usually sparkled with mischief, were dark, with something I'd only seen once before at Eleanor's funeral, when he'd stood beside her casket and asked me where Grandma had gone. He looked like that now, like he'd seen death. "I heard something," he said. His hands were still shaking, still gripping my sleeve like it was the only solid thing in the world. Something really bad. The kitchen was quieter than the rest of the house, insulated by the swinging door that separated it from the dining room. I could still hear Rachel's voice beyond it, pitched high and bright, telling some story about her book club. She was alone in there now, talking to empty chairs, but she didn't seem to notice. I crouched down so I was eye level with Mason. His face had the translucent quality of shock, like if I looked hard enough, I could see straight through to his racing heart. "Tell me everything," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. The voice I'd used in my classroom when a student came to me with something serious. The voice that said, "I'm listening, I believe you. You're safe with me." Mason's breath hitched. Dad was talking to himself down there in the basement. What did he say? The boy's eyes darted toward the dining room, checking. He said, "She told me it worked perfectly last time." And then he said to do it exactly like she showed him. My stomach dropped. I don't know. He didn't say a name. Mason's fingers twisted in the hem of his shirt. Grandpa, who's she? I thought of Rachel in the dining room, her perfect posture, her perfect smile, her perfect performance, the way she'd taken over the conversation the moment Connor left. The way she controlled everything, even the silences. Go on, I said. What else? Something about an outlet by a bathtub and disconnecting wires? The words tumbled out faster now. He said, "The ground wire." I don't know what that means, but he kept saying it. Disconnect the ground wire. My mouth went dry. I'd done enough home repairs over 40 years to know exactly what that meant. A GFCI outlet without proper grounding near water. It was a death trap waiting to happen. And Money Mason continued, and he said $920,000. By Friday, he said there was no choice. $920,000. My life insurance policy, the one Eleanor and I had taken out 30 years ago, to make sure Connor would be taken care of if something happened to us. She'd been gone 3 years, and I'd never changed the beneficiary. Connor would get $920,000 if I died. Grandpa. Mason's voice pulled me back. Are you okay? I wasn't. I was 65 years old, and my son, my only child, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike and tie his shoes, was planning to kill me. Did your dad see you? I managed to ask. No, I hid behind the water heater, but I knocked something over and he almost found me. His phone buzzed and he left. Mason's eyes were huge, dark with fear. Grandpa, I'm really scared. What does it all mean? I wanted to tell him it was nothing, a misunderstanding. But Mason was 9 years old, not stupid, and he'd heard what he'd heard. And I'd seen Connor's hands trembling, seen the fear in his eyes, the expensive watch next to white knuckles. It means, I said, carefully choosing each word like stepping stones across a river, that we need to be very careful, very quiet. Do you understand? Is Dad in trouble? Yes. I thought the worst kind. Don't say anything to anyone, I told him. Not to your mom? Not to your dad? Not to anybody. Can you promise me that? Mason nodded, but his chin trembled. Grandpa, what's going to happen? I didn't have an answer. My mind was racing, trying to fit the pieces together. The bathroom, the outlet, the disconnected ground wire, water, and electricity. It would look like an accident. An old man living alone. Tragic but not suspicious, and I'd be dead. Footsteps in the hall made us both freeze. Connor appeared in the kitchen doorway. His face was flushed, eyes darting between Mason and me, sharp and assessing. Everything okay in here? I straightened up my knees, protesting, forced my voice into something approaching normal. Fine. Mason was just helping me clear some dishes. Connor's gaze lingered on Mason, who'd gone very still beside me. You were gone a while, buddy. I was looking for the bathroom, Mason said quietly. Upstairs next time. There was an edge to Connor's voice, something harder than I'd heard before. You know the house better than that. Did he suspect? Had he heard Mason down there after all, Come on, Connor said, gesturing. Your mom's asking for you. Mason passed his father without looking up, disappearing into the dining room where Rachel's voice immediately brightened. There you are, sweetie. Connor started to follow, then stopped, turned back to me. For a moment we stood there, father and son, in the kitchen, where I'd made him breakfast before school for 18 years, where I'd taught him to crack eggs without getting shell in the bowl. You okay, Dad? He asked. You look pale. Fine, I said. His jaw tightened. He knew I was lying, same as I'd known he was. Good, he said finally. Then he left. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to Rachel's voice rise and fall in the next room. My hands found the edge of the counter, gripped it hard enough to hurt. $920 by Friday. She told me it worked perfectly last time. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Last time, there had been a last time. Whatever Connor was doing to my bathroom, Rachel had done it before, successfully, to someone else. And now she was having Connor do it to me. I heard Connor's chair scrape in the dining room. Heard him say something about the weather. But Rachel stayed in the doorway, and watched me. Her eyes moved from the swinging door where Mason had gone, then back to me, lingering, calculating. I saw her mind working behind those eyes. Saw her trying to figure out if her perfect plan had developed a crack. Then she smiled. That same brilliant, practiced smile she'd worn all evening. I need any help in here, Sean. Sweet as honey, sweet as poison. No, thank you. I've got it. She nodded slowly, still studying me the way a cat studies a mouse before deciding whether to pounce or play. Then finally she turned and glided back to the table. And I understood with cold, crystalline certainty, my daughter-in-law wasn't just involved in this plot. She was the architect, the designer, the one pulling every string. Connor was afraid because someone had made him afraid. Someone who knew exactly how to manipulate fear into action. Someone who'd done this before and gotten away with it. Rachel had done this, was doing this. And Connor was nothing more than her tool. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp, pulling me out of the darkness where my thoughts had been circling. I took a breath, steadied myself against the hall table, and opened the door. Bob Lawrence stood on my porch, snow dusting his shoulders, holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. His wife Marie stood behind him with a bottle of champagne, their smiles bright against the winter night. Shan, happy almost New Year. Bob's voice boomed into the house, carrying that particular enthusiasm Americans reserve for holidays. Brought you Marie's famous chicken and rice? Thought you could use something easy. That's very kind, I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal, steady, like I was a person who hadn't just learned his son was planning to kill him. Come in, please. You'll catch your death out there. The phrase caught in my throat, catch your death. If only Bob knew. They came in stamping snow from their boots, and I helped them with their coats. Moved through the motions like an automaton. Take coat, hang coat, accept casserole, place on counter. Smile, nod. Be the gracious host Eleanor had spent 40 years teaching me to be. In the living room, Rachel had materialized like magic. Marie, Bob, so wonderful to see you. She air-kissed both of them, took the champagne bottle, examined the label. Oh, this is lovely. Connor, honey, could you open this? Connor emerged from wherever he'd been lurking, took the bottle with hands that shook slightly and disappeared into the kitchen. I watched Rachel watch him go. Saw something flicker across her face. Annoyance, maybe, or calculation. More doorbell rings. The Reeves arrived with cookies. The Pfizers brought a cheese platter. Within 20 minutes, my living room was full of people I'd known for years. Good people. Kind people. People who waved from their driveways and helped shovel my walk after heavy snow. None of them knew that in this very house, a murder was being planned. I moved among them on autopilot, accepted their condolences about Eleanor. It had been 3 years, but people still mentioned her at gatherings, laughed at Bob's joke about the Syracuse weather. nodded as Marie complained about the new stop sign on Maple Ridge. But I was watching Rachel. She was magnificent. There was no other word for it. She floated through the room with champagne glass in hand, touching arms, laughing at jokes, asking the Pfizers about their daughter's college applications. She remembered everyone's names, everyone's stories. When Marie mentioned her mother's hip surgery, Rachel's face showed exactly the right amount of concern. Oh no, how is she recovering Rachel's hand on Marie's arm? You must be so worried. It was a perfect performance. Too perfect. I taught high school for 38 years. I knew what real looked like, and I knew what performance looked like. Rachel was performing. Connor, on the other hand, had given up pretending. He'd stationed himself in the corner by the bookshelf, refilling his wine glass every 10 minutes. When Bob Lawrence tried to engage him in conversation, Connor's responses were monosyllabic. His eyes kept drifting to the windows, to the door, to anywhere but the people in front of him. The Connor Tom Reeves said, wandering over with his beer. How's the real estate market treating you these days? Connor stared into his wine glass. Market's tough. I bet interest rates are killer right now. We're managing just fine. Rachel appeared at Connor's elbow like a guard dog sensing danger. Her smile was brilliant, her voice bright. In fact, Connor just closed a big deal last week. Isn't that right, honey? Connor's jaw tightened. Yeah, big deal. Rachel's hand settled on his shoulder. From across the room, it looked affectionate, but I saw the way her fingers pressed down. Saw the way Connor's shoulders hunched under that grip. She was controlling him. Every word, every conversation, every interaction. When he started to say something she didn't like, she'd steer it away. When he drank too much, she'd take the glass with a laugh and a honey, slow down. When his face showed too much of whatever he was feeling, she'd touch his arm and he'd go blank again. I'd seen this before in my classroom when a bully controlled a weaker kid. In parent conferences when one spouse dominated another, but I'd never seen it done so smoothly, so invisibly. To everyone else in this room, Rachel was the perfect wife taking care of her stressed-out husband. Only I could see the strings. The house grew warmer with bodies and conversation. Someone turned on music Frank Sinatra because apparently that's what you play at a 65-year-old man's New Year's party. The Lorraines started dancing in my living room. Mason sat on the couch with a handheld game, not playing, just staring at the screen. And I thought I need to check that bathroom. Need to see what Connor did down there. Need evidence, need proof. Need something more concrete than a 9-year-old's overheard conversation. At 7:45, I cleared my throat. Excuse me, folks, house feels a bit cold. I'm going to check the furnace. Rachel's head snapped toward me from across the room. Oh, Sean, let Connor handle that later. Everyone was looking at me now, smiling, nodding. Poor old Sean, always fussing with that old furnace. I've been checking that furnace for 15 years, I said, keeping my voice light. Won't take but a minute. But you have guests, Rachel started, and they're having a wonderful time without me hovering. I smiled at the room. Help yourselves to anything in the kitchen. I'll be right back. I started toward the basement door. Behind me, I heard Rachel say something to Connor. Heard the urgency in her lowered voice, but I didn't turn around. Didn't stop. My hand found the basement doorknob. Dad. Connor's voice loud enough to carry. I can check it. Really, I've got it, son. I opened the door. The basement stairs descended into darkness. Behind me, the party continued laughter music, the clink of glasses, normal sounds, safe sounds. I took the first step down. Behind me, Rachel's laugh rang out bright and charming as a bell. Someone had told a joke. Everyone was laughing now. But I heard what they couldn't, heard the edge beneath the brightness, heard the performance in every note, the laugh of someone who'd done this before and gotten away with it. The basement stairs creaked under my weight, each step taking me deeper into the cold. I reached for the light switch at the bottom, and the fluorescent tubes flickered to life with that familiar electric hum that had been the soundtrack of this house for decades. The basement looked the same as it always had. Concrete floors, exposed beams, the water heater Mason had hidden behind storage boxes stacked against the far wall. But everything felt different, now contaminated, like Connor had brought something poisonous down here and left it waiting. I went straight to the electrical panel. It was mounted on the wall, near the stairs, a gray metal box I'd opened 1,000 times over the years to flip breakers after a storm or reset a tripped circuit. My hands knew the latch by muscle memory. I pulled it open. 20 circuit breakers lined up in neat rows, each one labeled in Ella Launer's careful handwriting. Kitchen outlets, living room lights to the washer-dryer, and their third row down bathroom, first floor. The breaker switch itself looked normal, but the screws holding the panel cover, they had fresh scratches around them, bright metal showing through where a screwdriver had slipped. Recent work. Very recent. My chest tightened. I closed the panel and moved toward the small bathroom tucked into the corner of the basement. We'd added it years ago, back when Connor was in high school, and complained about having to go upstairs in the middle of the night. It was cramped, just a toilet, a small sink, and a shower stall barely big enough to turn around in. I flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered once, then held steady. The bathroom looked ordinary. Clean white tiles, a slightly rusty shower head, the blue hand towel I'd hung there last week. But my eyes went straight to the outlet beside the sink, the one I'd installed myself, making sure to use a GFCI outlet, because this was a bathroom, because water and electricity don't mix, because that's what the building code requires and what keeps people safe. Except it wasn't a GFCI outlet anymore. I knelt down my knees, protesting against the cold tile. The outlet looked almost right, white plastic cover, 2 receptacles, a ground hole. But GFCIs have those 2 buttons in the middle. Test and reset. Safety features that cut power in a fraction of a second if they detect a ground fault. This outlet had no buttons, just smooth plastic where they should have been. Someone had replaced my GFCI outlet with a standard one. My hands were shaking as I pulled my pocket knife from my jeans and unscrewed the cover plate. It came off easily, too easily. The screws were loose, barely finger tight. Behind the plate, I saw the wiring and my stomach dropped. The hot wire black connected properly. The neutral wire white connected properly, but the ground wire bare copper that should have been wrapped around the green grounding screw was just hanging there, disconnected, cut, and pushed back into the box. Like it didn't matter. It mattered. It was the only thing that mattered without that ground connection. If something went wrong, if the hot wire touched the metal sink or the shower head or the towel bar, anyone touching that metal while wet would complete the circuit, would become the ground. The electricity would flow through them, stopping their heart in seconds. It would look like an accident, a tragic accident. Old house, old wiring, these things happen. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, opened the camera, started taking pictures, the outlet from straight on. Close-up of the disconnected ground wire, the loose screws, the missing GFCI. I took 6, 7, 8 photos, making sure every detail was visible, making sure no one could say I was wrong or confused or making it up. Then I stood and looked around the bathroom. The trash can in the corner caught my eye. A small plastic bin I usually emptied once a week. Inside, under a crumpled paper towel, I found the original GFCI outlet. I lifted it out carefully, like it was evidence in a crime scene, because that's what it was. The outlet was intact, perfect, the buttons still working when I tested them. Nothing wrong with it at all. It had been removed and thrown away for one reason only, because it would have kept me safe. More photos. The GFCI in the trash, the label showing it was rated for bathroom use. The buttons that could have saved my life. I uploaded everything to my cloud storage right there, standing in that cramped bathroom with my heart hammering. Waited for the confirmation that the files were backed up, stored somewhere Connor couldn't reach, even if he smashed my phone. 52% battery enough. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw them in the corner behind the toilet where they'd been kicked or fallen rubber gloves. The heavy-duty kind electricians use yellow thick, meant to protect against electrical shock. Connor had worn these while he worked. While he disconnected that ground wire, replaced that outlet, set this trap. He'd protected himself from the very danger he was creating for me. I photographed them too. Then I backed out of the bathroom, out of that space that smelled like bleach and death, and stood in the main basement area trying to breathe. This was real. This was happening. My son had spent time down here maybe yesterday, maybe this morning, while I was out getting groceries, carefully, methodically turning my bathroom into an execution chamber. And upstairs right now he was drinking wine and pretending everything was normal. Above me, the floorboards creaked. Someone was moving across the kitchen floor. I froze listening. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, not the quick movement of someone getting more champagne or checking on the casserole. These were the steps of someone who knew exactly where they were going, toward the basement door. I shoved my phone into my pocket, the evidence burning against my chest like a hot coal. The photos were there. The proof was there. But I was trapped down here, and someone was coming. The basement door opened. Light spilled down the stairs. Sean, Rachel's voice, sweet as honey, sweet as arsenic. You've been down there quite a while. Need any help? I had maybe 5 seconds to decide. Come up with a story, or tell the truth that would get us both killed. The furnace sat against the far wall, old and reliable, the same one that had heated this house since 1998. I moved toward it, away from the bathroom, away from the evidence of what Connor had done. My hands went to the filter access panel, fumbling with the latch, like that was why I'd come down here. Rachel's footsteps descended slowly, each step deliberate, measured. I didn't turn around, but I could feel her presence filling the basement, like cold water rising. Everything all right down here? I kept my voice level, casual. The voice of a man checking his furnace, not a man who just discovered his murder had been meticulously planned just looking at the filter. Old habit. Connor could have done that for you? She was closer now. I could smell her perfume. Something expensive floral. It mixed with the basement smell of concrete and old wood. You shouldn't be down here alone. The stairs are steep. There was concern in her voice. Perfect concern, the kind a devoted daughter-in-law would have for her aging father-in-law. I finally turned to face her. She stood 3 steps from the bottom, backlit by the kitchen light spilling down the stairwell. It made her a silhouette, all sharp edges and shadow. Her face was in darkness, but I knew she was smiling. She was always smiling. I've been taking care of this house for 40 years, I said. I know my way around. Of course you do. She came down the last 3 steps, her heels clicking against the concrete. Now we were on the same level, and I could see her face clearly beautiful, composed, and watching me like a hawk watches a rabbit that strayed too far from its hole. Her eyes moved past me, scanning the basement, the water heater, the storage boxes, the trash can in the corner of the bathroom doorway. Did she see it? The GFCI outlet I'd pulled out, examined, photographed. Had I put it back exactly as I'd found it? Or had I disturbed something that would give me away? Her gaze lingered on that bathroom door, lingered long enough that my heart started hammering. It's getting late, she said, her eyes still on that doorway. You should rest before midnight. You've been looking tired. There was an edge to her voice now, something beneath the sweetness, a question she wasn't quite asking. I'll rest when I'm done here. But Sean, she took a step closer. You really should take care of yourself. At your age, you never know what could happen. An accident on these stairs, a fall in the shower. Her pause was deliberate. Things can go wrong so quickly in old houses. The threat wasn't even veiled. She was telling me she knew I'd been snooping. Knew I'd found something. Or maybe she was just reminding me how easy it would be for me to die. I'm careful, I said. When are you? We stood there in silence, 5 apart in the basement, where my son had tried to build my death. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Upstairs. Someone laughed, probably Bob Lawrence telling another one of his terrible jokes. The sound felt like it was coming from another world. 5 seconds of silence that felt like 5 years. Then Rachel smiled wider. Mason's been asking for you. He seems upset about something. My blood went cold. Was that a threat too? Was she telling me she knew Mason had been down here, that she knew he'd heard Connor? I'll be right up, I said. My voice came out harder than I'd intended. Firmer, good. Let her hear it. Let her know I wasn't some helpless old man she could push around. Her smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation assessment, like she was running numbers in her head, figuring odds, deciding whether her plan was still intact or if it had developed cracks. Rachel. I stepped toward the stairs. I need to get past. She didn't move. Just stood there blocking my path, studying my face, like she could read every thought I'd had in the last 30 minutes. Of course, she said, finally, but she took her time stepping aside. Took her time making me brush past her on those narrow stairs, making me feel how easily she could reach out and grab me, push me, send me tumbling backward onto that concrete floor. I climbed up slowly, one hand on the railing, feeling her presence behind me like a knife at my back. Every step I expected to feel her hands on my shoulders. Expected to feel myself falling, but I made it to the top. Made it into the kitchen, where the warm light and the smell of coffee and casserole felt like sanctuary. I turned around. Rachel stood at the bottom of the basement stairs looking up at me. Her phone was in her hand now. Her thumbs moved across the screen, typing something fast. Then she looked up at me and smiled one more time before disappearing back into the basement's shadows. I stood there breathing hard, my hand pressed against the kitchen counter to steady myself. 2 seconds later, across the living room, Connor's phone buzzed in his pocket. I watched him pull it out, watched his face as he read whatever Rachel had just sent him, watched the color drain from his cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. He looked from his phone to me. Our eyes met for just a second. Then he looked away, fast, shoving the phone back in his pocket. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, not from the wine, from fear. My son was afraid. I could see it in every line of his body, in the way he hunched his shoulders, in the way he couldn't meet anyone's eyes. But he wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of her. I made it back to the living room at 8:15, my heart a drum against my ribs. The phone in my pocket heavy as a stone. Around me, the party continued. Champagne glasses, clinking, laughter, rolling in waves. Sinatra crooing from the speaker. Everything normal, everything safe, everything a lie. I settled into the armchair by the window, the one Eleanor used to claim on winter nights, and forced my face into something that resembled calm. My mind, though, was racing through scenarios like a teacher grading essays, each one marked in red. If I confronted them now right here in front of the Laurens and the Reeves, what would happen? Connor was desperate, and Rachel was something far more dangerous. She was controlled, calculated, and Mason was sitting 3 feet from his mother, small and 9 years old. If I accused them in a room full of people, would they panic? Would someone get hurt? I couldn't risk it. Leaving wasn't any better. I could grab Mason, get in the car, drive somewhere. But where it was, New Year's Eve, hotels were booked. And what would I tell the police that my son might electrocute me because his wife told him they'd think I was paranoid, or worse, senile? And while I was explaining myself, Rachel would have time. Time to reinstall the GFCI, dispose of the gloves, erase every trace of evidence. I could call 911 right now, but the Crawfords were still here. The Martins had just arrived. If the police came now in the middle of a party, with 20 people milling around, what would they find? A family gathering, a concerned daughter-in-law, and an old man making wild accusations on the most stressful night of the year. They'd take a statement, maybe check the basement, and then they'd leave. And I'd be alone with Connor and Rachel, more vulnerable than before. No, I needed the right moment. When the guests had gone home, when the house was quiet, when I could lock myself somewhere safe and make that call, the upstairs bathroom, the master bathroom, Eleanor and I had renovated 12 years ago. Solid oak door, a lock that worked a window that faced the street. I'd wait until 10:30 when the countdown to midnight was close enough that people would start heading home, but late enough that Connor and Rachel would think their window was closing, but I wouldn't go downstairs to that death trap. I'd go up and I'd call for help. The plan settled over me like a weight, heavy but solid. But there was still Mason. I looked across the room to where he sat on the couch, small and hunched, picking at a throw pillow. His parents were 10 FT away. Connor by the liquor cart pouring his fourth whiskey, and Rachel by the fireplace, her laughter bright and sharp as breaking glass. Mason's eyes met mine, and I saw it again, that fear. I stood slowly and crossed the room, sat down beside him close enough that our conversation would look like nothing more than a grandfather and his grandson passing the time. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "You want to stay up late tonight, watch the ball drop with me?" His eyes widened. "Really, really? We can camp out right here, watch a movie." Mason nodded, but he wasn't smiling. He understood this wasn't about fun. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Tonight you sleep right here on this couch, nowhere else. And if you need to use the bathroom, you don't use yours. You come upstairs and use mine. The one in my bedroom. Do you understand?" He swallowed, nodded. "Say it back to me." "I sleep on the couch," he whispered, "and I only use your bathroom." "Good boy." Footsteps behind me. I straightened, turning to find Connor approaching, his face flushed from whiskey. That he said, his voice too loud. "You look exhausted. Why don't you head upstairs, get some rest before midnight?" I met his gaze and saw at the script Rachel had given him. "I am fine," I said evenly. "I want to stay up with Mason." Rachel materialized at Connor's elbow, her smile perfect. "But you look so pale, Sean. We're worried about you." "I appreciate that, but I'm not tired." Connor's jaw tightened. Rachel's smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind her eyes. Irritation quickly smothered. "Well," she said lightly, "if you change your mind, just let us know." They drifted back toward the crowd, but I caught the look. They exchanged frustration, impatience. I was supposed to be upstairs by now, alone, vulnerable. The Crawfords left at 9:15. The Pfizers followed 10 minutes later, but new guests kept arriving, and through it all, Rachel worked the room. She refilled drinks. She told stories. She made sure everyone knew how tired poor Sean looked, how he really should rest. She was building an alibi. He was exhausted. He went upstairs early. We told him to be careful. At 9:30, she brought me a mug of hot chocolate. "I made this for you," she said, setting it on the side table. "It'll help you sleep." I looked at the mug, at the tiny marshmallows floating on top, at Rachel's hand still resting on the handle. And I thought of Eleanor, of the plays we used to read together on winter nights. Macbeth, Hamlet, all those poisons poured into goblets and loving cups. "Thank you, Rachel," I said. "I'll drink it in a bit." She didn't move, just stood there waiting. "Now it's better while it's hot," she said, softly. "I know. I just want to let it cool a little." 5 seconds of silence, long enough for the room to feel smaller. And then Rachel's smile stretched wider. "Of course," she said, "take your time." She walked away, but I saw it just for a heartbeat. The way her expression went cold, flat, empty. She knew I wasn't going to drink it. She knew I suspected something, and that made me dangerous. That made Mason dangerous. Across the room, Connor checked his phone. His face went white. He glanced at Rachel, and she gave him the smallest nod. Whatever message she just sent him, it wasn't good. My son looked at his phone, looked at me, and quickly looked away, his hands shaking. Not from the cold, from fear. Connor was afraid, but not of me, of her. By 10 years, their desperation had become impossible to hide. Connor stood in front of me, swaying slightly, the whiskey bottle dangling from his hand. He said, his voice too loud, too insistent. "Seriously, you need to rest. Tomorrow's a big day." "A big day? What big day?" "The day I'd be dead." "I'm fine," I said. Rachel appeared beside him, her smile still in place but her eyes hard. "Sean, why don't you take a nice hot bath? Relax your muscles. You'll sleep better." A bath. The first time she'd mentioned it directly. "I don't take baths," I said evenly. "Only showers." She didn't miss a beat, right? "Of course." "Well, a hot shower then." "It'll do you good." After midnight, her jaw tightened just for a second. Just long enough for me to see the frustration crack through that perfect mask. Connor reached for her arm, pulling her toward the kitchen. "Rachel, a word." They disappeared through the doorway, their voices dropping to urgent whispers. I stayed in the armchair. Mason curled beside me, both of us pretending to watch the television while we listened. "He's not listening." Connor's voice strained and desperate, running out of time. Rachel sharper, colder. "Friday, then you have to make him." Silence, then footsteps. They returned to the living room, Connor's face flushed and sweating. Despite the cold, Rachel's expression smoothed back into that flawless calm. At 10:15, the Lorens bundled into their coats and headed for the door. "Happy New Year, Sean. Take care of yourself." "You too, Bob. Drive safe." At 10:20, the Reeves and the Pfizers followed their laughter, echoing down the driveway as they climbed into their cars. At 10:25, the Crawfords and the Martins said their goodbyes, pressing casseroles into my hands and wishing me a peaceful new year. And then the door closed, and it was just us, just family. The silence was worse than the noise of the party had been. It pressed down like a weight, thick and suffocating. Rachel stood by the fireplace, her hands folded in front of her, her smile bright and terrible. "Well," she said lightly, "just us now." Connor paced back and forth across the living room, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, now not bothering with a glass. His hands shook. His eyes darted toward me, then away, then back again. Rachel's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket, glanced at the screen, and her face went hard. "Flat." "Connor," she said quietly. "Kitchen now." He followed her like a dog on a leash. I couldn't hear what they were saying this time. They'd moved deeper into the kitchen, farther from the doorway. But I caught fragments, single words that drifted back like smoke. "Can't wait." "I do it now." "No choice." Mason's hand found mine on the armrest. His fingers were cold. I squeezed gently, trying to tell him without words that it would be okay, that I had a plan, that we'd make it through this. They came back. Connor first, his face pale and slick with sweat. Rachel behind him, composed and perfect, her smile back in place, like a mask she'd pulled from a drawer. "Sean," she said warmly, "I've prepared a bath for you." Downstairs bathroom, hot water, lavender bath, salts, everything you need. I stared at her. A bath downstairs bathroom, where the GFCI was gone and the ground wire hung loose, and the water would make me a perfect conductor for $920,000 worth of motivation. "I told you," I said slowly, "I don't take baths." "Oh, but this one's special." Rachel said, her voice bright, cheerful, insistent. "I added Epsom salts. It'll help with the aches." "You've been on your feet all night. I appreciate that, but I'll shower later. The water's ready now." Her smile didn't waver. "It would be a shame to waste it." Connor stepped forward. "Dad, please just go take the bath. You'll feel better." There it was. The script she'd given him, the push. "No," I said. Rachel's smile froze, not faltered. froze like something carved from ice. "Now, Sean," she said, her voice dropping half an octave. "You really should," I said. "No." Silence. 10 seconds of it. Long enough for the room to shrink, for the air to thicken, and then Rachel's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, her jaw tightened. She looked at Connor, nodded once a command. He crossed the room toward me, his movements jerky, mechanical. "Dad, come on. Let's get you upstairs or downstairs, wherever. You need to rest. I'm resting here." "No, you're not." His voice cracked. You're being stubborn. You're Connor." I met his eyes, held them. "I'm not going anywhere." He stared at me, and for just a moment I saw it. My son, the boy who used to build model airplanes at the kitchen table, the teenager who cried when his dog died, the man who'd stood beside me at Eleanor's funeral and held my hand while they lowered her into the ground. And then Rachel's hand touched his shoulder, and that boy disappeared. "It's fine," Rachel said smoothly. "If Sean wants to sit up all night, that's his choice." She smiled at me. "We just want you to be comfortable. I'm comfortable." "Good." Her eyes didn't leave mine. "Then we'll all stay up together like a family." She sat down on the couch. Connor sat beside her, and they watched me, both of them waiting. It was 10:28. I'd never in my life used lavender bath salts. I'd never asked anyone to prepare a bath for me. And yet there she stood, lying smoothly, confidently, waiting for me to walk into that death trap. It was time to end this, I stood. "I'm going to use my own bathroom," I said. "Upstairs." Rachel's smile flickered. "But the one down here is already ready. I prefer my own. Thank you." I moved toward the stairs. Connor stepped in front of me, blocking the way. His eyes were glassy from the whiskey, his breath sharp and sour. "Dad," he said, "use the one downstairs now." It was the first time all night he'd been aggressive, direct. "Move, Connor. Not until you move." He didn't. He just stood there swaying slightly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I stepped around him. He grabbed my arm. "Dad, please, just use the downstairs bathroom. It's easier. I pulled free. The adrenaline was surging now, sharp and hot in my chest. I started up the stairs, gripping the railing, moving as quickly as my 65-year-old knees would allow. Connor followed, his footsteps heavy and uneven behind me. "Dad, wait, you can't, Connor." Rachel's voice cold and sharp as a blade. "Stop." He froze halfway up the stairs. "Let him go," she said quietly. "But we have to, Connor." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Let him go. If they used force now, it would be too obvious, too messy. This only worked if it looked like an accident. Connor stopped climbing. I didn't look back. I reached the top of the stairs, crossed the landing, and pushed open the door to the master bedroom. Our bedroom, mine and Eleanor's. Behind me, Connor's voice broke. "Dad, wait." I stepped inside and closed the door, locked it. Crossed the room to the bathroom, the ensuite, the one Eleanor had insisted we renovate 12 years ago when her knees started giving out. Solid oak door, brass. Fixtures, a window that overlooked the street. Safe. Connor was at the bedroom door, now rattling the handle. Dad opened the door. "I need privacy." I called back. "I'll be out in a minute." "Dad." He pounded on the door. 3 heavy blows that shook the frame. Rachel's voice drifted up the stairs, cold and controlled. "Connor, come down here." But now silence, then footsteps, retreating, heavy, reluctant. I stepped into the bathroom and locked that door too. Leaned against it, my heart hammering in my chest, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. This bathroom was safe. I checked the wiring myself just 2 months ago when the outlet near the sink had started flickering. Everything was grounded. Everything worked. I pulled out my phone. 10:31, battery at 47%. I opened the photos, scrolled through them, the electrical panel, the missing GFCI, the disconnected ground wire hanging loose like a noose, the outlet that should have protected me but had been turned into a weapon, the yellow rubber gloves behind the toilet, all of it right here. Evidence. My finger hovered over the screen. 3 numbers. That's all it would take. 9-1. 3 numbers to save my life. 3 numbers to destroy my family. Outside, I heard footsteps again. Connor pacing in the hallway. Back and forth, like a caged animal. And then Rachel's voice sharp and clear through the door. He's not coming out. What do we do, Connor, desperate, panicking? We wait. We can't wait. It's almost... Then you should have made him use the downstairs bathroom. I tried. You failed. Silence heavy and thick. I stared at the phone in my hand, at the 3 numbers I needed to dial, at the photos that would send my son to prison, at the life insurance policy worth $920,000 at the deadline Friday that was driving them to this, at Mason downstairs alone with his parents. Mason, who'd heard his father mutter about disconnecting ground wires and making it look like an accident. Mason, who'd risked everything to tell me the truth. Mason, who was 9 years old and whose world was about to shatter. My hand shook outside. Connor's footsteps continued back and forth, back and forth. Rachel's voice cold and calculating. If he doesn't come out in 10 minutes, we'll need another plan. What plan? I'll think of something. I always do. I looked at my phone, at the screen, at the keypad, waiting for me to make a choice. Eleanor's voice in my head, warm and steady. Do what's right, Sean, not what's easy. I'd taught literature for 38 years. I taught my students about moral courage, about standing up when it mattered, about choosing truth over comfort. Now it was my turn. I looked at the screen. 3 numbers. I stared at them. Outside, Connor's footsteps moved back and forth across the hall. Rachel's voice, sharp as broken glass. He's not coming out. My finger trembled above the screen. 3 numbers. That's all it would take. I pressed call. 1 ring. 2. 911. What's your emergency? A woman's voice, calm, professional. The most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. My name is Shaw Miller, I whispered. 1432 Maple Ridge Drive, Syracuse. My son and daughter-in-law are trying to kill me tonight. Sir, I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you speak up? I can't. They'll hear me. They've sabotaged the electrical system in the bathroom. The GFCI outlet has been removed. The ground wire has been disconnected. They're planning to electrocute me. I heard typing, fast, efficient. Are you in immediate danger right now? Yes. I've locked myself in the upstairs bathroom. They tried to force me to use the one downstairs. The one they sabotaged. Is anyone else in the house? My grandson, Mason Miller, 9 years old? His bathroom might be sabotaged too. More typing. I'm dispatching units to your location right now. Stay on the line with me, Mr. Miller. I have photos. I said, my voice shaking. Of the outlet, the disconnected wiring, the original GFCI in the trash, everything. That's excellent, Mr. Miller. Officers are en route. Estimated arrival, 6 minutes. 6 minutes. 360 seconds between me and safety. I leaned against the door, the phone pressed to my ear, counting my breaths. And then wham! The bathroom door shook in its frame. I nearly dropped the phone. Dad! Connor's voice loud and desperate. Who are you talking to? Do not open that door, the dispatcher said firmly. I won't, I whispered. Dad, answer me. Wham! 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 Heavier now, deliberate. He was throwing his shoulder against the door, and then another voice. Rachel's, sharp as a knife. Sean, open this door right now. They know I said into the phone. Officers are 4 minutes out. That door will hold. Crack. The frame splintered just a little, the screws starting to pull free from the wood, but the lock held. Who are you calling? Rachel screamed. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. And her voice had lost every trace of that perfect, controlled sweetness. This was raw, furious, desperate. This was the voice of someone who'd done this before and knew her time was up. Sean. Connor's voice cracked. Please, they'll kill us if we don't pay. You don't understand. They'll kill us. Loan sharks. The $720,000. The deadline on Friday. Connor wasn't just greedy. He was terrified. But that didn't change what he'd done. What they'd built in that basement bathroom? A trap designed to look like an accident. Wham! The door shook again. The frame cracked a little more. Mr. Miller. The dispatcher said, her voice steady. 3 minutes? That door is solid oak. It will hold. I pressed my back against it. My phone showed 44% battery. The photos were backed up to the cloud. Mason was downstairs. Mason was still with them. There's a child downstairs, I said urgently. My grandson Mason, he's 9, he warned me. If they realize he told me officers have been informed, they will secure the child first. I promise you, Mr. Miller. Wham, wham. Open the door, Rachel shrieked. Open it now or I swear to God. Rachel. Connor's voice quieter now broken. Stop, just stop. It's over. It's not over. She was panting, gasping. We can still, if we can, just... He called the cops. Rachel, he called them. It's over. Silence. 5 seconds of it. And then Rachel laughed, high and sharp and edged with hysteria. The sound of someone watching their entire plan collapse. Fine, she said. Fine? You want to destroy your own son? You want to send Connor to prison? I didn't answer. Mr. Miller, the dispatcher said calmly. 2.5 minutes. You're doing great. Sean, Rachel again, her voice pleading now. Please, please. We'll leave right now. We'll go. You'll never see us again. Just don't do this, ma'am, I said into the phone. How close are they? 2 minutes, 15 seconds. First unit is turning onto your street now. Wham! Connor hit the door again, but his heart wasn't in it. The impact was weak. Defeated. Dad, he said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. You wanted the money, I said quietly. $920,000, and you were willing to kill me for it. Silence. Officers are 90 seconds out, the dispatcher said. Rachel's voice dropped, low, venomous. You self-righteous bastard. You're going to ruin your son's life. And for what? Your precious morals. For the truth, I said, and then I heard it. Faint, distant, but growing louder. Sirens. Though here the dispatcher said, officers are pulling up now. The sirens grew louder, closer. Car doors slamming, voices shouting, heavy boots on the front steps. Police opened the door. Downstairs loud and authoritative. Rachel's voice frantic. Connor, we have to. There's nowhere to go, Connor said quietly. More pounding. Downstairs. This is the Syracuse Police Department. Open the door now. Footsteps running. Rachel fleeing down the stairs. Connor hesitating outside the bathroom door. Dad, he whispered. I'm sorry. And then he was gone too. Mr. Miller, the dispatcher said. Officers are entering the residence now. You can unlock the bathroom door when they identify themselves at your bedroom door. Do you understand? Yes, you did the right thing. I slid down until I was sitting on the cold tile floor. The phone still pressed to my ear, my whole body shaking. The mask had shattered. Rachel's voice, raw, furious, desperate, was the voice of someone who'd killed before and knew her time had run out. Sean, Connor had screamed. Please, they'll kill us if we don't pay. The dispatcher's calm voice. Mr. Miller, officers are at your location. 3 minutes. That door will hold. 3 minutes. 180 seconds. And then this nightmare would end. 3 minutes. I had to survive 3 more minutes. Mr. Miller, the dispatcher, said, stay calm. 2 and 1 or 2 minutes. Wham! The door cracked further. A piece of the frame splintered off and clattered to the floor. Sean, Rachel's voice shrill and desperate. You don't understand. We'll lose everything. I pressed harder against the door. You were going to kill me and Mason. We weren't going to hurt Mason, just you. Her voice cracked. Only you. Every word recorded. Every confession captured by the 911 system. Dad, please. Connor sobbing now. The loan sharks threatened to kill us both. I didn't have a choice. Shut up, Connor, Rachel hissed. I spoke into the phone. Did you hear that I heard it? The dispatcher said calmly. It's being recorded. Officers are 90 seconds out. Crack. The frame split further. The screws were pulling free, but the lock still held. And then I heard it from downstairs. Grandpa. Mason's voice terrified. Mason! Rachel suddenly frantic. Get your shoes. We're leaving now. No, 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 no. Mason, stay where you are, I shouted through the door. Where is your grandson? The dispatcher asked urgently. Unstairs. They're trying to take him. Sounds of a struggle. Mason crying out. Mason, now I'm not going with you. And then sirens faint at first, but growing louder, closer. Everything stopped. Connor's voice broken. Oh God. Rachel, they're here. Back door, Rachel said, move. Footsteps thundering down the stairs. Grandpa. Mason's voice, the police, and then boom. The front door exploded inward. Syracuse police hands where I can see them. Heavy boots pounding through the house, multiple officers shouting commands. Rachel, this is a misunderstanding. We didn't. Ma'am, on the ground now, Connor, don't shoot. We're not armed. Sounds of a scuffle, chair scraping, someone hitting the floor hard. Mr. Miller, the dispatcher, said, Officers are inside. You can open the door. My hands shook as I unlocked it, twisted the knob, pulled it open. 2 officers stood in my bedroom, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Sean Miller. Yes. Are you injured? No, my grandson. He's safe with Officer Ramirez downstairs. Safe. Mason was safe. My knees buckled. One of the officers caught my arm, steadying me. Easy, sir. You're okay. It's over. Over. I stumbled toward the stairs, the officers flanking me. My legs felt like water. My chest ached from holding my breath for what felt like hours. In the living room, Connor was on his knees, hands cuffed behind his back. His face pressed against the carpet I'd vacuumed this morning. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Rachel stood against the wall, 2 officers holding her arms, her face empty, cold, like someone had flipped a switch. And then I saw him. Mason sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket, a female officer kneeling beside him. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying. Grandpa? He launched himself off the couch and ran to me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You're okay, he whispered. You're okay. I held him tight, my hands in his hair, my chin on top of his head. He was shaking, or maybe I was shaking. I couldn't tell. You're safe, I said. You're safe now. An officer approached, tall, broad-shouldered, late 40s. Mr. Miller, I'm Sergeant Hayes. We need to secure the scene and take statements. Can you tell me what happened tonight? I opened my mouth, closed it. Where did I even start? The basement bathroom, I said. The electrical outlet. They sabotaged it. I have photos. We'll need to see those. But first, your grandson. He said you were in danger. What did he tell you? Mason looked up at me, his eyes wide, trusting. He heard his father, I said quietly, in the basement, talking about disconnecting the ground wire, about 920 yen, $800, about making it look like an accident. Sergeant Hayes nodded, making notes. We'll document everything. We're calling in a detective and the electrical inspector. No one's going near that bathroom until it's been photographed. Across the room, 2 officers were lifting Rachel to her feet. She didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared straight ahead, her face a mask. And then as they led her past me toward the door, she turned her head, looked at me, and smiled. Not the warm, charming smile she'd worn all night. Not the desperate, pleading smile from outside the bathroom door. This was something else, something cold, something that said, "You think you've won, but this isn't over." It lasted only a second, and then she was gone, guided through the shattered front door and into the flashing red and blue lights outside. Connor was next. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just stumbled forward as the officers walked him out, his head down, his shoulders hunched. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd helped with algebra homework, the man who'd stood beside me at Eleanor's funeral. Gone. Mason pressed closer against me. Is Dad going to jail? I didn't know how to answer that. How to explain to a 9-year-old that his parents had tried to kill his grandfather, that his mother had done this before, that the life he knew was gone forever. I don't know, buddy, I said. But you're safe. That's what matters. Sergeant Hayes cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, I need you and your grandson to come down to the station. We need full statements, and we'll have a victim advocate there to help with Mason. Can I swallowed. Can I change first? Get him some clean clothes, of course. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. I looked around the living room at the overturned chairs, the shattered door, the champagne glasses still sitting on the coffee table half full and forgotten, at the hot chocolate Rachel had made for me, still sitting on the side table, cold, now untouched evidence. I realized all of it. This was my home, the place Eleanor and I had built a life, the place I'd raised Connor, the place I'd thought was safe, and tonight it had become a crime scene. Mason tugged on my hand. Grandpa, can we go now? I nodded. Yeah, buddy. Let's go. As we climbed the stairs to pack a bag, I glanced back one more time. At the room where I'd almost died, at the family I'd almost lost, at the nightmare that was finally over. Or so I thought. At 10:45, a woman in a gray suit walked through my shattered front door, her badge gleaming under the living room lights. Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Rebecca Brown. I need to understand what happened here tonight. She was late 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm authority that made you feel like she'd seen everything and wouldn't be shocked by anything. A younger woman followed her in. This is Diane, our victim advocate. She'll be here for you and your grandson. Diane knelt beside Mason, speaking softly. Hey, sweetheart, how about we get you some hot chocolate? Let the grown-ups talk for a bit. Mason looked at me. I nodded. It's okay, buddy. I'll be right here. He followed her into the kitchen, glancing back over his shoulder. Detective Brown pulled out a notepad. Walk me through it. I handed her my phone. I have photos. The outlet they sabotaged, the disconnected ground wire, the original GFCI in the trash. She scrolled through them, her expression darkening. When did you take these? Around 7:50 tonight. After my grandson overheard them, her eyes snapped up. Your grandson heard them planning this. Mason heard his father, I said, in the basement, talking to himself. He said, she told me it worked perfectly last time. Do it exactly like she showed me. Rebecca went very still. Last time, that's the exact phrase. Yes. Why, she didn't answer immediately. Just made a note in her pad, underlining something twice. I'll need to look into that. First, let's document everything. The forensics team was already at work. 2 technicians in the basement bathroom photographing every angle. One of them emerged 20 minutes later. Detective GFCI has been removed. Ground wire disconnected. This was deliberate. Any prints? We'll run tests, but we found these. He held up an evidence bag. Yellow rubber gloves in the pocket of a jacket hanging by the basement door. Connor's jacket. At 11:30, James Warren arrived. My lawyer rumpled and blur-eyed but alert. Sean, don't say another word tonight. Detective Brown nodded. Understood. Full statement at the station tomorrow. 10 hours a.m. We'll be there, James said. Rebecca looked at me, her expression softened. Mr. Miller, I need to tell you something. She paused, chose her words carefully. If you'd used that bathroom tonight, death would have been instantaneous. You wouldn't have felt it, but you'd be gone? The room tilted. I gripped the armrest of the chair. What about Mason's bathroom? I asked his mother. She wanted him to go with her if she'd gotten him out of the house and he'd used his bathroom before they left. Rebecca's face went grim. We'll check it right now. She radioed upstairs. 3 officers climbed to the second floor. I heard their boots, overhead doors opening, muffled voices. 5 minutes later, they came back down. One of them spoke quietly to Rebecca, her jaw tightened. She turned to me. Mason's bathroom was sabotaged too. Same method. Disconnected ground. Non-GFCI outlet. My knees buckled. An officer caught my arm, steadying me into a chair. They were going to kill both of us, I whispered. Across the room, Mason sat with Diane, sipping hot chocolate, his small hands wrapped around the mug. He was 9 years old. I know, Rebecca said softly. I have a daughter his age. At 12:30, they brought Connor and Rachel out of the patrol cars and into transport vans. Rachel passed by the front window, her hands cuffed behind her back, her face blank. She glanced toward the house, toward Mason visible through the window. No emotion, no regret, just a long, cold look. Mason ducked behind me. At 1:15, there was a soft knock at the door. Mrs. Martin from next door, wrapped in a coat over her nightgown. Sean, honey, you and Mason are staying with us tonight. I couldn't. This house is a crime scene, Detective Brown said gently. It'll be sealed for at least 24 hours. You can't stay here. So we packed. Diane helped. Clothes for Mason, toiletries, his stuffed bear from the couch. Rebecca handed me a card. Call me if you need anything, day or night. At 2:30 in the morning, I sat in the Martins' guest room. Mason curled beside me on the bed. Mrs. Martin had made up the couch downstairs for me, but I couldn't leave him alone. Grandpa. His voice was small in the darkness. Yeah, buddy, I'm scared. Me too. Silence. Then? Is Mom going to jail? I closed my eyes. Yes. He started to cry. Quiet, broken sobs that shook his small frame. I held him. Didn't say it would be okay because I didn't know if it would be. Just held him while he cried for the mother who'd tried to kill us both. At 3:15, he finally fell asleep, exhausted. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing. Everything I thought I knew about my family had shattered tonight. Connor desperate and terrified and willing to kill his own father. Rachel cold and calculating, orchestrating it all. And Mason, brave, terrified Mason, who'd saved my life by telling me the truth. What happened now? Where did we go from here? At 3:47, my phone buzzed. A text message from Detective Brown. I almost didn't open it, almost let it wait until morning, but something made me click it. Mr. Miller need to see you at the station. 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. Bring your lawyer. There's something you need to know about Rachel. My hands started shaking again. I stared at the message, at those last 9 words. There's something you need to know about Rachel. What did that mean? What had she found? I thought about the phrase Mason had heard. She told me it worked perfectly last time. Last time? Last time Rachel had killed someone. I set the phone down on the nightstand, my chest tight, my mind racing. Tomorrow I'd find out the truth. Tomorrow I'd learn exactly who my daughter-in-law really was. But tonight I sat in the darkness of a stranger's guest room, my grandson sleeping beside me, and wondered how I'd missed it. How I hadn't seen the monster living in my son's house, wearing my daughter-in-law's face. At 10 hours, I walked into the Syracuse Police Department with James at my side. Detective Brown met us in the lobby and led us down a fluorescent lit hallway to her office. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. James, Mr. Miller, please sit. She opened a folder, a thick one. I ran background checks on both Connor and Rachel. She pulled out the first file. Connor's history is what we expected. Failed business ventures, gambling debts, totaling $720,000 to multiple loan sharks, threats of violence if payment wasn't made by Friday. She closed that folder and opened a second one. But Rachel? She slid a photograph across the desk, a wedding photo. Rachel in a white dress, smiling that perfect smile. But the man beside her wasn't Connor. He was younger, softer features, dark hair. She was married before. I asked. Rachel Ann Peterson married David Peterson in Albany 8 years ago. I stared at the photo. Connor never mentioned that because she never told him. Rebecca said I asked him last night. He had no idea. She slid another document across the desk. A death certificate. David Peterson, deceased 7 years ago, age 34. Cause of death, accidental electrocution in home bathroom. My hands started shaking. James leaned forward. Jesus Christ. The Albany medical examiner ruled it an accident. Rebecca continued. Faulty GFCI outlet. No signs of foul play. The investigation was closed within 2 weeks. She pulled out another sheet. Rachel collected $485,000 in life insurance. She killed him, I whispered. We're reopening the case, Rebecca said. But it gets worse. She turned her laptop toward me. A screenshot of Google search history. How to disable GFCI outlet, bathroom electrocution accident statistics, life insurance payout for accidental death. Do police investigate bathroom accidents? The searches were dated, all of them from 7 years ago, 2 months before David Peterson died. Connor doesn't know about this, does he? I asked. No, he was in shock when I mentioned it last night. Kept saying Rachel told him she'd never been married before. James shook his head. So Rachel manipulated Connor into using the exact method she'd already used successfully once. Exactly, Rebecca said. Connor's a tool. Rachel's the architect. I looked at the death certificate at David Peterson's young face in the wedding photo. Does Connor know now about David? Rebecca glanced at her watch. We're telling him this morning. Would you like to be there? I hesitated. Did I want to watch my son learn that his wife was a murderer, that he'd been manipulated into becoming one too? Yes, I said. Scene shift. Interrogation room behind one-way glass. Connor sat on the other side of the glass, unshaven, exhausted, his hands cuffed to the table. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. A detective entered the room carrying a folder. Mr. Miller, let's talk about your wife's past. Connor looked up. I told you everything. The debts, the threats, did you know Rachel was married before Connor froze? What to David Peterson in Albany 8 years ago? That's no. She said I was her first, her only. The detective slid the wedding photo across the table. Connor stared at it. His face went white. That's Rachel, but she never. David Peterson died 7 years ago, electrocuted in his bathroom. Faulty GFCI outlet. I watched through the glass as understanding dawned on Connor's face. Then horror. Oh my God. She did this before. She knew exactly how to do it because she'd already. Connor stood abruptly, the handcuffs rattling. She used me. I thought it was my idea. She kept saying there's no other way. But she knew she'd done it before. He collapsed back into the chair, his head in his hands, sobbing. Behind the glass, I watched my son break. James spoke quietly. He really didn't know. No, I said, but he still tried to kill me. I turned away from the window. Manipulation doesn't erase what he did. Back in Detective Brown's office. As we left the observation room, Rebecca stopped me in the hallway. Mr. Miller, there's one more thing. She pulled out another file. We found Rachel's financial records. After David's death, She went through 3 more relationships, all with older, wealthy men. All ended when the men either became suspicious or cut off financial support. She paused, met my eyes. Connor was target number 5. You were supposed to be murder victim number 2, and then she would have moved on to number 6. The hallway seemed to tilt. Where is Rachel now? I asked. Interrogation room 3. She hasn't said a word, just sits there. Rebecca's expression darkened. Smiling. I looked back toward the observation rooms, toward where Connor sat destroyed by the truth, toward where Rachel sat silent and calm and smiling. My daughter-in-law, a woman who'd killed before, who'd planned to kill again, who'd manipulated my son into becoming a murderer alongside her, and who would have succeeded if a 9-year-old boy hadn't overheard his father muttering in a basement. What happens now? I asked. Rebecca closed the file. Now we build the case. Both of them will be charged. Connor with attempted murder, Rachel with attempted murder. And if we can prove it the murder of David Peterson, will you prove it? We're going to try. The search history helps. We're pulling financial records, phone records, everything. If there's evidence, we'll find it. James touched my arm. Sean, we should go. Mason's waiting. Mason, my grandson, the boy who'd saved my life, the boy whose parents were going to prison. I nodded. Thank you, Detective. Mr. Miller, Rebecca said as we reached the door. You did the right thing calling 911, protecting your grandson. Don't forget that. I wanted to believe her, but as I walked out of the police station into the cold January morning, all I could think about was Connor's face when he realized the truth and Rachel's smile. Cold, empty, unrepentant, the smile of someone who'd done this before and who would have done it again. 3 weeks later, I sat in the Onondaga County Courthouse, watching my family's destruction play out under fluorescent lights and the weight of justice. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day. Day 1, the prosecutor stood before the jury. This case is about greed manipulation and calculated murder. And for Rachel Miller, this isn't the first time. She introduced the David Peterson case. The Albany Police Department had reopened it as a homicide investigation. Day 3. Mason's testimony recorded on video to spare him from the courtroom. His small voice filled the room. I heard Mom tell Dad what to do. She said it worked perfectly last time. I watched the jurors' faces. Several looked horrified. Day 5. An electrical engineer took the stand. Both bathrooms were sabotaged identically. Death would have been instantaneous. It would have looked like an accident. He showed diagrams, explained how the disconnected ground wire turned a safe outlet into a lethal trap. Day 8, a forensic accountant. Connor Miller owed $720,000, but Rachel Miller had $340,000 in personal debts that Connor knew nothing about. The prosecutor leaned forward, so Rachel had her own financial motive. Yes, separate and concealed from her husband. Day 10. A detective from Albany. Rachel Peterson. Now, Rachel Miller received $485,000 after David Peterson's death. She spent it all within 18 months on luxury purchases, travel high-end apartments. She went through the money quickly and needed more. Day 12. My turn on the stand. I described finding the sabotaged outlet, the disconnected ground wire, the GFCI in the trash, the yellow gloves. I described Rachel's control over Connor, the way she'd pushed me toward the basement bathroom, the hot chocolate she'd made. The defense attorney cross-examined me. But isn't it possible Connor acted alone, that you're blaming Rachel to protect your son? My grandson heard Rachel giving instructions. I said Mason heard her say she'd done it before. A 9-year-old's testimony. He saved my life, I said. And he told the truth. Day 15. Connor took the stand as part of his plea agreement. He looked broken, thin, older. She told me Dad wouldn't feel any pain. He said, his voice barely audible. She showed me exactly how to disable the outlet. Said she'd researched it thoroughly. I didn't know she'd done it before. I swear I didn't know. The prosecutor asked. Did she ever express remorse? Second thoughts? No, she kept saying it's the only way. We have no choice. She made it sound like we were victims. Were you? Connor looked at his hands. I was desperate, terrified, but I made the choice. I'm guilty. Day 18. Rachel didn't testify. Her lawyer invoked her Fifth Amendment right. She sat at the defense table silent, expressionless for the entire trial. Never flinched, never cried, just watched. Day 19. Closing arguments. The prosecutor. Rachel Miller is a predator. She has killed before, and she would have killed again. She manipulated a desperate man into doing her bidding. She planned to murder 2 people, including a 9-year-old child. She deserves no mercy. The defense. There's no direct evidence. Rachel Miller committed any crime. Suspicion is not proof. Coincidence is not guilt. Day 20. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the room went silent. In the matter of the attempted murder of Shaw Miller, how do you find guilty? In the matter of the attempted murder of Mason Miller, guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. I closed my eyes, felt James's hand on my shoulder. Connor's sentencing had been separate. He'd pleaded guilty 25 years. Rachel's sentencing was today. The judge looked at her over his glasses. She stood still, expressionless, as he spoke. Miller, you orchestrated a cold-blooded plot to murder 2 people, including a 9-year-old child. This court has reviewed the suspicious circumstances surrounding David Peterson's death. This is a pattern, a system. You are a danger to anyone who trusts you. He paused. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Rachel's expression didn't change. The bailiffs stepped forward to escort her out. As they led her past the gallery, past where I sat, she stopped, looked at me, leaned close enough for me to hear her whisper. You took everything from me. I met her eyes. You tried to take my life. She smiled. That cold, empty smile. You should have used that bathroom, Sean. And then she was gone, led through the side door, disappearing into the prison system where she'd spend the rest of her life. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Mr. Miller, how do you feel? Will you forgive your son? What will happen to your grandson? James helped me push through to the car. We drove in silence. Only when we were alone, parked in the Martin's driveway, did I let myself feel it. Connor would be 70 years old when he got out of prison. If he got out, Rachel would die behind bars, and Mason had lost both parents, not to death to evil. I thought of Eleanor. Remembered a warning she'd given me 20 years ago after Connor had lied about a business deal. Connor takes shortcuts, Sean, and shortcuts are dangerous. I should have listened. I should have seen the desperation, the weakness, the willingness to sacrifice anything, anyone for money, but I hadn't. And now a 9-year-old boy was paying the price. I sat in the car, my hands on the steering wheel, and let myself cry. For my son, for the man he could have been, for David Peterson, who died 7 years ago in a bathroom just like mine. For Mason, who'd lost his childhood in one terrible night, and for Eleanor, who wasn't here to help me pick up the pieces. When the tears finally stopped, I drove back to the Martins' house. Mason was waiting on the porch, Diane sitting beside him. He ran to me. Grandpa, is it over? I knelt down, held him. Yeah, buddy, it's over. Can we go home now, home? The house on Maple Ridge Drive, the crime scene that had once been our sanctuary. Soon, I said soon, but I didn't know if it would ever really feel like home again. 2 months after the trial, life became quiet. Too quiet. The court awarded me full custody of Mason. No one contested it. Rachel's parents didn't show up. They'd cut ties with her years ago. It turned out after David Peterson's death, they'd suspected something, but they'd never spoken up. Connor's parental rights were terminated. Now it was just Sean and Mason. We built new routines. Breakfast together at the kitchen table, homework at the same table after school, reading before bed. The Chronicles of Narnia, because Mason liked the idea of other worlds where things made more sense. He had nightmares 2 or 3 times a week. He'd wake up crying, and I'd hold him until the shaking stopped. Grandpa, can Mom get out? Never. Do you hate her? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I hate what she did. I don't know if I hate her, but I'll never forgive her. Do you hate Dad? Longer pause. Your dad made terrible choices. He hurt me, but he was manipulated. It's complicated. Do you still love him? He's my son. I'll always love the person he was before, but I can't forgive the person he became. Mason thought about that. I understand. I hoped he did. But I knew it would take years, maybe a lifetime, for him to fully process what his parents had done. Dr. Elizabeth Brown Mason's therapist met with me once a week. He's remarkably resilient, she said. But he'll carry this scar forever. Make sure he knows it wasn't his fault. I tell him every day. Good. Keep doing that. One Saturday morning, Mason looked up from his cereal. Grandpa, I saved you. Right. You absolutely did. Then why do I feel bad I sat down my coffee? Because you love your parents. Saving me meant they got in trouble. You did the right thing. But the right thing can still hurt. He nodded slowly. Okay, in April, we visited Eleanor's grave at Mount Adna Cemetery. I knelt in front of the headstone, brushing away dead leaves. Eleanor, this is Mason. He's living with me now. He's a brave kid. You'd be proud of him. Mason placed tulips Eleanor's favorite in the holder. She liked red ones, right, Grandpa? She loved red ones. We sat for a while in silence. Around the grave, crocuses were pushing through the soil. Small purple blooms, fragile but persistent. Mason noticed them. They're growing every spring. I said, no matter how cold the winter was. He touched one gently. That's nice. On the drive home, I asked, Mason, do you want to plant a tree? A tree of Japanese maple for a new beginning? His eyes lit up. Really, really. That Sunday we dug a hole in the backyard. Mason helped his small hands gripping the shovel alongside mine. Will it get really big? He asked. If we take care of it like we're taking care of each other. We planted the sapling. It was small, fragile, just a thin trunk with a few branches. Mason watered it carefully, making sure every root got soaked. When will it be tall? Years from now? But we'll watch it grow together. You promise? I promise. That night Mason slept through without nightmares. The first time in weeks, 3 months after the trial, a letter arrived postmarked from the state prison. Connor's handwriting. I held it for 20 minutes staring at my name on the envelope. Finally, I opened it. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I'm sorry. I was weak, stupid, selfish. Rachel used me, but I let her. I made the choice. I could have walked away. I could have asked for help. I didn't. Mason is lucky to have you. Tell him his dad loves him, even though his dad doesn't deserve to. Tell him to be better than me. Connor. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd show it to Mason, maybe not. For now I had a tree to water. Summer came. The maple sprouted new growth. Tiny red leaves, bright and delicate. Mason watered it every morning before school. Grandpa, look. New leaves. I knelt beside him, touching the fragile shoots. It's growing just like you. Will it be okay if we take care of it? If we're patient, I can be patient. I know you can. We stood there together, watching the sunlight filter through the new leaves. And in that moment, looking at my grandson tending to something new and alive, I understood we'd survived the coldest winter. Spring had finally come. Dr. Brown told me something during one of our sessions. Healing isn't linear, Mr. Miller. There will be setbacks, bad days, triggers. But Mason has something most trauma survivors don't. What's that he has you? Someone who believes him, someone who protected him. That's rare and it's powerful. I thought about that a lot. Mason had saved my life. But maybe in some small way I was saving his too. One evening, Mason asked, "Grandpa, can we visit Dad?" I wasn't expecting that. "Do you want to?" He thought for a long time. "I don't know. Maybe someday?" "Not now." "Okay. When you're ready, will you come with me?" Of course. He nodded, went back to his homework. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to face Connor, to sit across from him in a prison visiting room and see what 25 years had already started to do to him. But if Mason needed me there, I'd go. Because that's what family did. Not the family we'd had before, the family defined by blood and obligation and manipulation, but the family we were building now, based on trust, on honesty, on showing up even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. The maple grew slowly, steadily. By midsummer, it was a foot taller. Its leaves deepened from bright red to burgundy. Mason measured it every week, marking the growth on a chart we taped to the fridge. 3 in this month, Grandpa. Good job taking care of it. We're taking care of it together. Yeah, together. And in that moment, kneeling beside my grandson in the backyard, watching him water a tree we'd planted to mark a new beginning, I realized something. We'd survived the coldest winter. Spring had truly come. 6 months after that terrible New Year's Eve, I sat on the porch on a warm summer evening, watching Mason play in the backyard beside the maple tree. I was 65 years old. I'd lost my wife 3 years ago, lost my son 6 months ago, nearly lost my life, nearly lost my grandson. But I'd gained something too. Clarity. Lesson 1. Love without boundaries is enabling. For years, I'd made excuses for Connor's shortcuts, his failed businesses, his gambling, his lies. He's just going through a rough patch. He'll figure it out. He's my son. I have to support him. Eleanor had seen the truth. She'd warned me 20 years ago, but I'd ignored her because I wanted peace. I wanted to believe my son was better than he was. That enabling nearly killed me. Love doesn't mean accepting everything. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means holding people accountable, even when it hurts. I wish I'd learned that sooner. Lesson 2. Trust your instincts. I'd known something was wrong. The Rolex on Connor's wrist while he claimed to be broke. Rachel's too perfect smile. The way she controlled every conversation. I'm a teacher. I spent 38 years reading people, spotting lies, seeing through facades. But I ignored my instincts because I wanted my family to be okay. And that almost cost Mason and me our lives. Now I listen. When something feels wrong, I pay attention. I don't dismiss it. I don't rationalize it away. I trust the voice in my head that says something's not right here. Lesson 3. Evil looks ordinary. Rachel looked like a loving mother. She brought casseroles to neighbors. She smiled at church. She volunteered at Mason's school. And she'd killed her first husband. Nearly killed us, and would have killed again. Monsters don't always look like monsters. They wear yoga pants and perfect makeup. They say all the right things. They blend in. The most dangerous people are the ones you'd never suspect. Lesson 4. Children are not their parents. Mason carries Connor's blood, Rachel's DNA, but he is not them. He's brave, honest, compassionate. He saved my life by telling the truth, even though it meant losing his parents. The sins of the father and the mother are not his to carry. I tell him that every day, and I'll keep telling him until he believes it. Lesson 5. Forgiveness is not mandatory. People say you have to forgive to heal. I don't believe that. I'm healing without forgiving Connor. I'm moving forward without forgiving Rachel. Forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation. Maybe someday I'll forgive Connor. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'm not bitter. I'm not consumed by anger. I'm just honest. He tried to kill me. I don't have to forgive that to live a good life. And that doesn't make me cruel, it makes me real. Lesson 6: family is who protects you. Connor was my blood. And he tried to kill me. Mason was in danger and he saved me. The Martins took us in when we had nowhere to go. James Warren fought for us in court. Detective Brown believed me when it mattered most. Family isn't just DNA. It's loyalty, protection, love. It's the people who show up, who stand beside you, who risk something for you. That's family. Lesson 7: life goes on. The maple tree keeps growing. Mason's nightmares are fading slowly, but they are. Every morning I wake up grateful. Eleanor would want us to live, not just survive, not just exist, but live. So we do. We plant trees, we read books, we visit her grave and tell her about our days, we laugh, we cry, we keep going because that's what life is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope. Mason ran up the porch steps, his hands muddy, his face bright with a smile. Grandpa the tree grew another inch. I marked it. I looked at this child, scarred, but healing, hurt, but brave, and thought, this is why I survived. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for this, for him, for tomorrow, for every tomorrow we'll have together. Let's go see it, I said, standing. He grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the backyard. And as we walked together toward that small growing tree, I realized something Eleanor used to say, Sean, the hardest winters make the strongest roots. We'd survived the hardest winter, and now together we were growing something new. If you're listening to this story, understand this. This isn't entertainment. This is a warning. Warning signs to watch for someone who has money, but constantly claims to be broke. Connor wore a rose gold Rolex while telling me he couldn't pay his bills. That contradiction. That was a red flag I ignored. Family members who ask about your insurance, your will, your daily routines. Rachel asked those questions. She was planning. Pay attention to questions that feel too specific, too probing. People who isolate you while pretending to care. They suggest you rest, take a bath, go upstairs, anything to get you alone and vulnerable. Anyone who pressures you to do something that makes you uncomfortable, go take that bath. Sean used the downstairs bathroom. Pressure isn't love, it's control. And most important, listen to children. Mason saw what I missed. He heard what I didn't. Kids notice things adults overlook because they haven't learned to rationalize evil away yet. If a child tells you something frightening about a parent or another adult, believe them. Investigate. Children rarely lie about fear. On trust. I trusted my son because he was my son, and he nearly killed me. Blood doesn't guarantee good intentions. Trust must be earned even from family, especially from family on speaking up. Mason was 9 years old, terrified, but he spoke up anyway, and that saved both our lives. If you see something wrong, say something. Even if it's about family, even if people won't believe you, even if it destroys relationships. Truth is more important than peace. On manipulation, Rachel fooled everyone. Neighbors, me, even Connor. Manipulators are experts at looking normal, at saying the right things, at blending in. Don't dismiss your instincts just because someone seems nice. Monsters don't announce themselves on evidence. I took photos, I backed them up to the cloud. That evidence saved my life. If you suspect something, keep records. Take photos, save texts, tell a friend you trust. Call the police if you're threatened. Don't wait until you're 100% sure. By then, it might be too late. On choosing life, I'm 65 years old. Some people said, well, you've lived a full life anyway. As if age makes life less valuable. Every day is precious at every age. If you're threatened, fight back. You matter. On Mason, people ask if I regret calling 911 and destroying my family. I didn't destroy it. Connor and Rachel did that when they chose murder over morality. What I did was save my grandson, and I'd do it 1,000 times again on faith. In my darkest moment locked in that bathroom, I prayed. Not for revenge, not even for survival, but for the courage to do what was right and for Mason's safety. That prayer was answered. Whatever you believe, know, this courage will come when you need it most. Final wisdom set boundaries even with family. Protection isn't cruelty, it's love. You can grieve who someone was while accepting who they've become. Children need truth, but deliver it gently. Healing takes time, but it does come. And sometimes the family you build is more important than the family you're born into. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you seen warning signs you ignored? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might save someone's life. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. We share these stories because they matter. Tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it? Where you are? I want to know this story reached you. Leave a comment below. To anyone in danger right now, trust your instincts. Document everything. Tell someone. Call 911. Your life is worth fighting for. To any kids listening, if you see something wrong, tell an adult you trust. Keep telling until someone believes you. You can save a life, maybe even your own. My name is Sean Miller. I'm a 65-year-old retired teacher from Syracuse, New York. I survived my son's plot to kill me. I'm raising my grandson Mason. We're planting trees and building a new life. If I can survive this, you can survive whatever you're facing. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, family is who protects you. Subscribe, comment, share. Thank you for listening to my story. It might just save your life. This family story haunts me still. I was a 65-year-old teacher who believed blood guaranteed loyalty. I learned the hardest way possible that family betrayal doesn't announce itself with villainous monologues. It arrives wearing your son's face, holding your daughter-in-law's casserole, smiling at your dinner table. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the Rolex on broke wrists. Don't dismiss your grandson's warnings because confrontation feels uncomfortable. Don't wait until you're praying to God in a locked bathroom, begging for courage to dial 3 numbers before you trust your instincts. The lessons from this family story: love without boundaries becomes enabling. Trust without evidence becomes suicide. And sometimes the greatest act of love is calling 911 on your own child. Family betrayal cuts deepest because we never see it coming. We make excuses, we rationalize. We choose peace over truth until truth chooses survival over peace. The worst family betrayal isn't the violence itself, it's the years of manipulation that made violence seem like the only option. God placed Mason in that basement to overhear his father's confession. God gave me those photographs as evidence. God granted me 3 more minutes when that door should have broken. Every moment was a gift I almost refused because I loved my son more than I loved the truth. This isn't just another family story for entertainment. It's a warning written in my grandson's tears and my son's 25-year sentence. Your turn. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? What warning signs have you ignored? Share your experience in the comments. Someone needs to hear it today. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss these real-life lessons. Share this with someone who needs courage to face their own family truth. Let's create a community where honesty protects us, not destroys us. I read every comment. Stay vigilant.